Rain cascaded down the towering glass windows of Manhattan's skyline, creating silver rivulets that reflected the neon glow of the city below. Inside the exclusive rooftop lounge of Sterling Tower, Alexander Stone sat alone at a corner table, his untouched glass of bourbon catching the ambient light. At 35, he commanded corporate boardrooms with ruthless precision and built technology empires that revolutionized entire industries. Tonight, however, his carefully constructed facade showed dangerous cracks. The elegant invitation lay before him like a personal insult. Victoria Ashford's engagement party, his former fiancée, the woman who had shattered their relationship 3 years prior by claiming he was emotionally unavailable, was marrying his primary business rival. Every elite circle in New York would attend, eagerly watching for his reaction to this public humiliation. Pride demanded he appear unaffected, but arriving alone would signal defeat. He needed someone who would make Victoria question her choices, someone who would remind her, and everyone else, of what she had abandoned. Fate delivered his answer in the form of Charlotte Blake. Charlotte had just finished her exhausting shift at the artisanal coffee shop 3 floors below, her apron still bearing stains from the endless stream of demanding customers. She wasn't supposed to access the executive lounge. Service staff rarely ventured into these rarefied heights, but she'd been specifically requested to deliver a premium order. Balancing the polished silver tray with practiced grace, she navigated through the dimly lit space when she noticed him, a devastatingly handsome man in an impeccably tailored charcoal suit, staring at a piece of expensive stationery as though it contained the secrets of the universe. She didn't recognize his face. To her exhausted eyes, he appeared to be another weary businessman in a city overflowing with them. But to Alexander, her timing felt orchestrated by destiny itself. "Excuse me," Charlotte said softly, approaching the marble bar to carefully set down her burden. Alexander's piercing blue eyes lifted to meet hers. Her chestnut hair had escaped from its practical ponytail, creating an endearing halo of escaped strands. Her sensible shoes showed wear from countless hours of standing. Yet something in her direct gaze radiated an unshakable inner strength that money couldn't purchase or influence corrupt. For a fleeting moment, he almost dismissed the audacious idea forming in his analytical mind. The concept was absolutely insane, potentially disastrous. But then Victoria's triumphant smile flashed through his memory, followed by the inevitable whispers that would shadow him if he appeared at her celebration without female companionship. "You," Alexander said suddenly, his authoritative voice cutting through the lounge's sophisticated atmosphere. Charlotte froze mid-movement, uncertainty flickering across her features. "Me?" "Precisely." His tone carried the same commanding presence he employed to negotiate billion-dollar acquisitions. "I require a companion for an engagement party this coming Saturday evening. I'll compensate you handsomely. Naturally. Consider it a mutually beneficial business arrangement." Charlotte blinked rapidly, convinced she had misunderstood his proposal. A business arrangement with a complete stranger? Alexander's calculating gaze assessed her thoroughly. She clearly wasn't accustomed to wealth. That much was immediately obvious. But she possessed a quiet dignity that genuinely intrigued him in ways he hadn't expected. "You won't remain a stranger for long," Alexander replied with practiced smoothness, his voice carrying the confidence of a man accustomed to getting exactly what he wanted. "One evening of performance. Pretend to be romantically involved with me. All expenses comprehensively covered, plus substantial financial compensation afterward." Charlotte released a laugh that balanced precariously between disbelief and hysteria. "That's absolutely the most ridiculous proposition I've encountered all week. I don't engage in ridiculous propositions," he stated matter-of-factly. Alexander slid the ornate invitation across the polished table surface, the gold lettering catching the warm ambient lighting. "This celebration is hosted by my former fiancée. I categorically refuse to provide her with the satisfaction of witnessing me attend alone." Every rational instinct screamed at Charlotte to immediately walk away. This enigmatic man clearly represented serious trouble, and her life contained sufficient complications without adding a billionaire's personal drama to the mixture. However, her rent remained 3 weeks overdue, her increasingly impatient landlord's tolerance wearing dangerously thin, and her cherished dream of opening an independent bookshop cafe seemed more impossible with each passing day of financial struggle. She glanced down at the expensive invitation, then returned her attention to his intense stare. "And if I agree to this arrangement?" Alexander leaned forward slightly, his voice dropping to an intimate whisper that sent unexpected shivers down her spine. "Then you perform the role of my devoted girlfriend convincingly. Smile naturally when cameras capture our image. Stand confidently when high society scrutinizes our every interaction. Nothing more complicated, nothing less professional." Charlotte's pulse accelerated as internal warning bells clanged loudly in her head. Every rational thought demanded she flee this dangerous territory immediately. Yet his offer dangled before her consciousness like a desperately needed lifeline in increasingly stormy financial seas. She straightened her shoulders with newfound determination, meeting his penetrating gaze directly. "Very well, but if this arrangement truly constitutes a business contract, then I insist on adding one absolutely non-negotiable condition of my own." Alexander raised one perfectly groomed eyebrow, his expression shifting to genuine intrigue. "Please, continue. Don't treat me like some expensive accessory you purchased for public display purposes. I'm not a designer handbag or a trophy to be exhibited. I'm a human being with inherent dignity and self-respect." For the first time that entire evening, Alexander's carefully controlled expression softened into something resembling authentic amusement. "Then we have successfully negotiated ourselves a mutually acceptable deal. Miss Blake, Charlotte Blake." She extended her hand with surprising confidence, effectively sealing the strangest agreement of her entire life. As their palms touched in a firm handshake, neither participant realized they were stepping directly into something far more emotionally complex and personally dangerous than a simple contractual arrangement. The rain had finally stopped by the time Charlotte made her way home through the glistening city streets. But her mind continued racing with the implications of what she had just committed herself to undertaking. She clutched her thin jacket tighter against the evening chill, wondering if she had just made the most brilliant decision of her life, or the most catastrophically foolish mistake she would ever regret. 3 days later, Charlotte found herself standing inside Sterling Technologies' executive headquarters, a gleaming monument to modern success that seemed to pierce the clouds themselves. The marble lobby resembled something from a futuristic movie, complete with cascading crystal installations and abstract sculptures that probably cost more than her annual salary. Alexander guided her through the pristine corridors with confident efficiency, his expensive Italian leather shoes clicking rhythmically against the polished floors. They entered a private elevator that whisked them silently to the top floor, opening into a sprawling executive suite that felt more like a luxury penthouse than a traditional office space. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking panoramic view of the city, while carefully curated artwork and sleek furniture created an atmosphere of understated power and sophisticated taste. "Catherine will handle your complete transformation," Alexander announced as an elegantly dressed woman appeared, tablet in hand and expression professionally warm. Catherine's expertly trained eyes assessed Charlotte in one swift, comprehensive glance, not unkind, but thorough enough to catalog every imperfection in her budget-conscious outfit. "Wardrobe consultations are prepared in our private styling suite," Catherine said briskly, her tone suggesting this was routine business. "We'll begin with comprehensive fittings, then proceed to etiquette coaching and essential media preparation." Charlotte's eyes widened with growing alarm. "Media preparation? You insisted on adding conditions to our arrangement," Alexander interjected, his tone carrying a subtle warning edge. "Consequently, I'm adding my own stipulations. If you're going to perform this role convincingly in my social sphere, you must look and behave appropriately. Otherwise, our entire agreement becomes void." Charlotte's chest tightened as pride warred violently with desperate financial necessity. She thought of her landlord's ultimatum, the sketches of her dream cafe, the mounting stack of overdue bills accumulating on her dresser. Slowly, reluctantly, she nodded her acceptance. The following several hours blurred into an intensive transformation process. Charlotte was ushered into a luxurious styling suite lined with designer gowns in silk, satin, and fabrics she couldn't begin to identify. Catherine and her professional team worked with military precision, presenting outfit after outfit, adjusting hemlines, cinching waists, critiquing posture and overall presence. Each mirror reflected a complete stranger, A sophisticated woman draped in elegant fabrics. Hair professionally styled into perfection. Makeup applied with artistic precision. Charlotte barely recognized her own reflection when she emerged wearing a stunning midnight blue evening gown that hugged her curves like liquid starlight. Alexander looked up from his mahogany desk. For the first time since their initial meeting, his carefully controlled expression shifted into something rawer, more genuinely human. "That will be perfectly adequate," he said quietly, though his appreciative eyes suggested his approval ran considerably deeper than mere professional satisfaction. Charlotte's cheeks warmed with unexpected pleasure. She couldn't determine if he was offering her a genuine compliment or simply approving a business investment. But either interpretation left her feeling strangely unsettled. By the time she changed back into her familiar clothes, her feet ached from designer heels and her head spun from the intensive crash course in high society etiquette. Catherine handed her a thick folder containing detailed notes and specific instructions. "You have exactly 3 days to master this material," Catherine said with professional authority. "The engagement party is Saturday evening. Be completely ready." Saturday evening arrived with the weight of storm clouds gathering on the horizon. Charlotte stood before her cracked bathroom mirror, barely recognizing the sophisticated woman staring back. The midnight blue gown transformed her into someone who belonged in Alexander's rarefied world, while professional styling had tamed her unruly hair into an elegant updo that sparkled with borrowed diamond accessories. Alexander arrived precisely on schedule, devastating in a perfectly tailored black tuxedo that emphasized his broad shoulders and confident bearing. His platinum cufflinks caught the dim hallway lighting, and for a breathless moment, Charlotte forgot her carefully rehearsed lines. "You look convincing," he said, his voice carrying undertones she couldn't quite decipher. "Just following your very specific instructions," she replied, accepting his offered arm with practiced grace. The ride to Victoria's engagement party passed in comfortable silence, Manhattan's glittering lights streaming past the Mercedes-tinted windows like fallen stars. Charlotte tried calming her racing heart by mentally reviewing Catherine's extensive coaching. Smile naturally. Maintain confident eye contact. Never fidget with jewelry. Always deflect personal questions with diplomatic grace. The Grand Metropolitan Hotel blazed with warm golden light, its ballroom transformed into something from an elaborate fairy tale. Crystal chandeliers cast rainbow prisms across walls draped in ivory silk, while perfectly arranged white orchids and roses created an atmosphere of romantic luxury that spoke of unlimited budgets and impeccable taste. Every head turned when Alexander entered with Charlotte gracefully positioned on his arm. Whispers rippled through the assembled crowd like wind through golden wheat fields. His formidable reputation preceded him, and tonight, he wasn't appearing alone as everyone had anticipated. Charlotte lifted her chin with growing confidence, forcing her most radiant smile while remembering Catherine's endless instructions. Stand tall with perfect posture. Never let them glimpse uncertainty. Project quiet strength and sophisticated intelligence. Then came their first significant test. Victoria Ashford glided toward them with predatory grace, resplendent in a cream-colored gown that probably cost more than Charlotte's annual income. Her smile appeared sharp as polished steel, her emerald eyes systematically assessing every detail of Charlotte's carefully crafted appearance. "Alexander," Victoria purred with practiced intimacy, leaning in to kiss his cheek with calculated familiarity. "I almost couldn't believe the circulating rumors. But here you are with such lovely company." Her calculating gaze shifted to Charlotte, cataloging and evaluating. "And who might this enchanting creature be?" Charlotte's stomach knotted with nervous tension, but she squeezed Alexander's arm gently before he could respond. "I'm Charlotte Blake," she said warmly, extending her hand with genuine friendliness. "You must be Victoria. Congratulations on your engagement. This party is absolutely breathtaking." Victoria's perfect smile faltered for just one fraction of a second. She clearly hadn't expected such gracious warmth or natural charm. "Thank you very much," she replied coolly, accepting the handshake with obvious reluctance. "And how exactly did you and Alexander meet? I'm always curious about his evolving social circles." Charlotte's mind raced frantically, Catherine's coaching voice echoing through her memory. "Keep explanations simple and believable. Never elaborate unnecessarily or provide excessive details." She glanced up at Alexander with carefully practiced affection, then returned her attention to Victoria. "We met at a rare bookshop. Actually, he was purchasing a first edition of Hemingway, and I mentioned he had excellent literary taste." The evening continued in a whirlwind of strategic introductions, champagne toasts, and carefully choreographed conversations that felt like an elaborate dance. Charlotte discovered herself improvising with surprising natural ability, transforming potentially awkward questions into charming anecdotes, leaning into Alexander's reassuring presence whenever the social scrutiny felt overwhelmingly intense. Each time she stumbled slightly, he steadied her with subtle touches or quietly redirected conversations away from dangerous territory. His protective instincts surprised her, suggesting depths beneath his calculated exterior that she hadn't expected to encounter. During the formal dinner service, Charlotte observed Victoria from across the elegantly appointed room, noting how the bride-to-be's attention kept drifting toward their table with obvious irritation. When a nervous server nearly spilled red wine on an elderly society matron, Charlotte instinctively stepped forward to steady the wavering tray and help address the minor crisis with gracious efficiency. The small act of spontaneous kindness drew warm, appreciative applause from nearby guests, and Charlotte blushed furiously under the unexpected attention. But Alexander's hand pressed gently against her back, his voice low and genuinely warm in her ear. "Absolutely perfect," he murmured with obvious admiration. "Completely perfect. It was nothing special," she whispered back, feeling her cheeks burn with embarrassment. "It was everything," he said meaningfully, his intense gaze holding hers longer than strictly necessary for their performance. As the glittering night progressed, Charlotte realized something genuinely unsettling was happening. She wasn't merely surviving this elaborate performance. She was actually excelling at it with increasing confidence. The nervous barista who had reluctantly entered Alexander's sophisticated world 1 week ago had been replaced by someone who could genuinely hold her own among Manhattan's most exclusive social elite. And Alexander, he was watching her with an intensity that made her pulse quicken dangerously. Really watching her, as though he couldn't quite reconcile the poised woman beside him with the one he'd first encountered in a coffee-stained apron and comfortable sneakers. But across the opulent ballroom, Victoria's emerald eyes tracked their every movement and interaction, and Charlotte instinctively knew this temporary victory was far from conclusive. Women like Victoria Ashford didn't accept defeat gracefully, and this social war was clearly just beginning. Later that evening, after most guests had begun filtering out into the Manhattan night, Charlotte felt simultaneously exhilarated and emotionally drained. She had successfully passed the first major test, but somehow she suspected the real challenges lay ahead. As they waited for their car, Alexander turned to her with an expression she'd never seen before, something vulnerable and almost uncertain. "You were remarkable tonight," he said quietly. "I couldn't have asked for a more convincing performance." Charlotte felt something twist painfully in her chest at the word performance. Because somewhere between the champagne toasts and strategic conversations, something fundamental had shifted. She was no longer pretending to find him attractive or interesting. The chemistry between them felt increasingly real, increasingly dangerous. "Just fulfilling my contractual obligations," she replied lightly, though her voice sounded strained even to her own ears. Alexander's expression darkened slightly, as if her words had somehow disappointed him. "Of course, strictly business." But as their eyes met in the soft glow of the hotel's entrance lighting, both of them knew they were lying to themselves and each other. 4 days after Victoria's engagement party, Charlotte woke to her phone buzzing incessantly on her nightstand like an angry hornet. Bleary-eyed and disoriented, she reached for it expecting perhaps a text from her best friend Emma about their work schedule. Instead, her screen displayed 17 missed calls and dozens of urgent text messages. Her blood turned to ice water when she read the first devastating headline: "Billionaire's paid companion. Alexander Stone's girlfriend exposed as hired actress." Charlotte's hands trembled violently as she scrolled through the brutal coverage spreading across every major gossip website and social media platform. Someone had somehow obtained compromising photographs of her entering Sterling Technologies for her makeover sessions. Worse yet, there were blurry but unmistakably damning images of what appeared to be contract documents spread across a conference table. The articles painted her as a calculating gold-digging opportunist who had convinced New York's most eligible bachelor to pay handsomely for her companionship services. Comment sections exploded with vicious speculation about her motivations and moral character. Words like fraud, pathetic, and social climber burned themselves permanently into her consciousness. Her phone rang insistently, and Emma's name flashed urgently on the screen. "Charlotte, oh my God, are you holding up okay? I'm seeing this horrible stuff everywhere. I can't discuss this right now," Charlotte managed, her voice cracking with barely contained emotion. "I need some time to process what's happening." She hung up abruptly and immediately tried calling Alexander. But it went directly to his voicemail system. Of course it did. He was probably surrounded by expensive lawyers and crisis management publicists, strategically planning how to extract himself from this media disaster while leaving her to face the flames alone. Charlotte threw on her clothes and raced through the city streets towards Sterling Technologies. Ignoring curious stares and whispered comments from passers-by who might have recognized her face from the morning's scandalous coverage. Building security attempted to stop her in the marble lobby, but she pushed past them into the executive elevator, riding it to the top floor fueled by pure adrenaline and righteous fury. She burst into Alexander's office without knocking, startling him as he stood contemplatively by the windows overlooking the sprawling city. "You knew this could happen," she said, her voice shaking with rage and profound hurt. "You deliberately let them destroy my reputation while you sit up here in your ivory tower. Completely untouchable by consequences." Alexander turned slowly, his expression carefully unreadable. "Charlotte, don't you dare," she interrupted sharply, holding up her hand to stop his words. "My landlord has already suggested I find alternative housing before my media circus negatively impacts property values. I can't walk down any street without people whispering and pointing. And you?" She pointed at him accusingly. "You're probably already strategizing how to spin this entire situation as some kind of elaborate publicity stunt." His jaw tightened visibly, something dangerous flashing in his intense blue eyes. "You think I wanted this catastrophe? That I somehow orchestrated this media attack? I think you don't care about collateral damage as long as you emerge completely clean." She shot back furiously. "Why didn't you immediately deny these allegations? Why didn't you tell them the actual truth?" Alexander's eyes flashed with something raw and painful. "Because the truth is impossibly complicated, Charlotte." 10 days passed in excruciating silence. Charlotte avoided glossy magazines, glowing phone screens, and whispered conversations that seemed to follow her wherever she ventured. She mechanically poured coffee, counted change, and pretended not to notice when customers recognized her face from the recent scandal coverage. Her tiny apartment felt smaller than ever, the walls seeming to close in as she attempted to sketch in her worn leather journal. But every page blurred with persistent memories of Alexander's voice, his unexpected moments of gentleness, the way he'd looked at her during those unguarded instances when neither was performing for an audience. Then, on a gray Tuesday morning that felt like every other hopeless day, Emma burst into the coffee shop waving a cream-colored flyer, her eyes bright with excitement and confused curiosity. "Charlotte, you absolutely need to see this immediately," she said breathlessly, practically vibrating with nervous energy. Across the elegant paper, bold lettering announced, "Visions, the Art of Charlotte Blake Private Exhibition hosted by the Stone Foundation." Charlotte's heart stopped completely. Below the title were professional photographs of her sketches, her cafe designs, her drawings of the city, her most private dreams that she'd carefully tucked away in a personal notebook. How had he possibly obtained them? "There's more," Emma said excitedly, flipping the flyer over with trembling hands. "Look at this personal statement." On the reverse side was a heartfelt message signed by Alexander Stone. "True artistic brilliance reveals itself in the most unexpected places. Charlotte Blake's work captures the soul of our city and the dreams that make us fundamentally human. This exhibition celebrates not just artistic vision, but the courage to pursue beauty even when facing overwhelming adversity." Charlotte's hands trembled as she read the prestigious address. The Morrison Gallery, one of Manhattan's most respected and exclusive art spaces. That evening, curiosity and something much deeper drew Charlotte toward the gallery's gleaming entrance. She hovered outside uncertainly, watching elegantly dressed patrons streaming through the doors beneath large banners bearing her name in sophisticated script. Taking a deep, steadying breath, she stepped inside. The space was completely transformed. Her sketches, enlarged, professionally framed, dramatically lit, lined the walls like precious treasures. Her coffee-stained drawings of the perfect bookshop cafe glowed under museum-quality lighting. Her quick sketches of Manhattan street life were displayed with the reverence usually reserved for acknowledged masters. Whispers filled the air around her. "She's the woman from the headlines," someone murmured appreciatively. "But examine this work. She's genuinely talented." Charlotte moved through the sophisticated crowd in a complete daze. Seeing her secret dreams made public and celebrated. At the center of the main gallery, a small bronze placard caught her attention. "All proceeds from this exhibition will fund the CB Community Arts Program, providing art supplies and professional instruction to underprivileged youth throughout New York City." Her throat tightened with overwhelming emotion. Even during their conflict, even after she'd walked away, Alexander had found a meaningful way to honor her dreams while simultaneously helping others pursue their own artistic aspirations. "Charlotte." She turned to find him standing near the gallery's entrance, dressed simply in a navy suit with no tie, looking somehow more vulnerable and human than she'd ever seen him before. The usual armor of wealth and corporate power had been completely stripped away. "Alexander," she whispered, his name catching in her throat like a prayer she hadn't realized she'd been holding back. "I should have asked permission before displaying your work," he said quietly, moving closer with hesitant steps. "But I needed the world to see you exactly the way I see you. Brilliant, talented, deserving of recognition." Charlotte shook her head, completely overwhelmed by the magnitude of his gesture. "You had no right to." "I know," he interrupted gently, his voice carrying raw vulnerability. "But I also know I couldn't let you disappear thinking that any of this was merely business to me." The gallery seemed to hold its collective breath as Alexander reached into his jacket and pulled out a small velvet box. Audible gasps rippled through the watching crowd as he opened it to reveal a simple, perfect solitaire diamond that caught the gallery's lighting like captured starlight. "The first time I asked you to be with me, it was purely for show," he said, his voice carrying clearly through the hushed space. "Tonight, it's not. No contracts, no conditions, no performance required. Just me, asking you to choose me. For real this time." Charlotte's eyes filled with tears as she looked at the ring, then at the walls surrounding them. Her dreams given form and light because of his unwavering faith in her artistic talent. "Alexander," she whispered, her voice breaking with emotion, "if this is real, if you truly mean it, I've never meant anything more in my entire life." She stepped forward, her hand trembling as she reached for his. "Then yes, yes, to all of it." The gallery erupted in spontaneous applause as Alexander slipped the ring onto her finger with shaking hands. Camera flashes illuminated their kiss like falling stars. But neither Charlotte nor Alexander cared about the headlines this would inevitably generate. They had discovered something real in the midst of pretense, something lasting in a world of temporary arrangements. 6 months later, Charlotte stood in the center of her dream cafe, watching workers put finishing touches on built-in bookshelves that lined every wall. Blake and Stone books was everything she had ever sketched and more. Cozy reading nooks with overstuffed chairs, tables perfect for laptops and long conversations, and a children's corner painted in warm, welcoming colors. The community art program Alexander had established in her honor had its headquarters upstairs, and the sounds of young voices and creative energy drifted down through the building's bones. "Second thoughts?" Alexander asked, appearing beside her with 2 cups of coffee from their gleaming espresso machine. Charlotte accepted the cup and leaned into his warmth. "Only about marrying a man who insists on buying me buildings instead of flowers." He laughed, the sound rich and unguarded. "I'll remember that for next time." Their wedding was planned for the following spring, held right here in the cafe, surrounded by books and friends and the dreams they had built together. The contract was over. Their real story was just beginning. As Charlotte picked up her pencil to sketch their next dream, she knew the best stories were just starting.